From security to psychology, France is said to change tactics to tackle reintegration issues surrounding returning jihadist children. That's as concerns linger. They could become a terror threat. Plus, it's revealed that thousands of Syrian opposition fighters are on Washington's payroll, with the Pentagon requesting $30 million from the U.S. budget to cover their wages. Also ahead in the program this RT News Hour, the so-named Siberian Ripper is jailed for life in Russia, found guilty of killing and mutilating 19 workers in the sex industry. Live from Moscow to the world, this is RT International. My name's Ewan O'Neill. Good to have your company. This hour's top story: France has laid out a new plan to reintegrate jihadist children returning from Syria and Iraq. Despite concerns still hanging over the danger they could pose to society, the focus has now shifted from one of isolating them from other children for now to a more integrated approach. Charlotte Dubinsky breaks down the issue for us from Paris.
They're just children, born innocent into a world of brutality. But while most children are playing with dolls and cars, these are being taught to play with guns and knives. And some have even been trained to kill.
Well, I mean, it will depend on each individual, I think. Certainly the Cubs of the Caliphate, I believe they're called, would be actually training in guns, knives, and how to kill people. And not only that, will have seen people being killed, and of course that makes it some form of normality for them, which is really scary, because that means when they do grow up, that will be their normality, and more likely to make them go and do something very similar, that are a real threat to society.
It's impossible to know just how many children have been brainwashed by ISIL, but they have already started to return home to Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands. Meanwhile, in France, the authorities are putting together a plan to reintegrate the returning children of jihadis. The Prime Minister has said that 68 have already come back. Many more are expected to follow.
Programmes to help these children readjust have been announced by governments across Europe. But is it too late to reverse the damage already done? Videos like this have emerged showing children carrying out mock executions.
The little children are not only victims, but they're on the cusp of being forced into being perpetrators. But in the video that we just saw, you see the sadism of the adults being played out through the children, so that they are destroying the mental capacity for the child to differentiate between reality and fantasy. It normalizes murder.
The road ahead for these children, she says, is difficult. And while there's no guarantee the therapy they receive will be successful, she is hopeful.
If the child had a fairly good emotional experience early, the child will tend to be more resilient in coming through very severe traumas. That's one thing. The other thing will be very much dependent on how well trained the therapists are.
Governments in Europe hope that by offering care and support to the children who return, they can help them cast off the horrors they have endured or even carried out. And yet the risks are still high that it might be too late to right the wrongs of children brainwashed and raised as ISIL fighters. Charlotte Dubinsky, RT, Paris.
10,000 Syrian rebels are on the Pentagon's payroll. That revelation coming from a U.S. Defense Department budget request. Washington now hopes to increase that number to 65,000, despite the crushing failure of a previous train and equip program.
One key element of the DoD's strategy to defeat ISIS is to train, equip, sustain and enable elements of the vetted Syrian opposition. These forces are projected to total approximately 60 to 65,000.
65,000. This pet army would be bigger than the Canadian or Australian militaries. And don't forget, there are already 3 warring armies in Syria. The Pentagon is planning on equipping and providing this puppet force with everything but their underwear. Tens of thousands of new rifles, machine guns, mortars, millions of rounds of ammunition, 1,000 vehicles. And don't forget, they're seemingly going to pay their salaries, $200 to $400 a month. It's all in the new counterterrorism fund request. It says clearly, once ISIS is destroyed, this new army will stabilize and patrol the territory it holds, near enough a third of Syria, which meshes well with Washington's plans to stay in Syria indefinitely, keep the country split up and prevent Assad from winning. But there are questions like, where is the US going to find 30,000 more moderate rebels when it couldn't find 10?
Can you tell us what the total number of trained fighters remains?
It's a small number, and the ones that are in the fight is we're talking four or five.
The last time the US trained, equipped and sent forth a rebel army, they all promptly gave up their guns and joined Al-Qaeda. They spent hundreds of millions on that, by the way. It was really embarrassing. Any way you look at it, this means more war. It says so in black and white. The US will only train and equip vetted Syrian opposition, and hope that this time they don't all turn out to be Islamist radicals.
Well, in the document, the Pentagon says it will monitor the use of arms it supplies to the rebels wherever possible. However, experts we spoke to believe there are no guarantees the weapons won't end up in the hands of extremists.
Well, I think they want to create, and in fact this is really what they have stated, is that they want to create conditions in Syria where the country is still divided. I mean, the record of the US and the CIA's operations in Syria is that, you know, the people they have supported all along have been extremists. This was the US goal all along, to militarize the conflict, to pour in foreign fighters and weapons across the Turkish border. And this was the US policy.
We don't know who these forces are. Clearly, some of them are going to be some of the forces, the opposition forces, which had been involved in the their struggle against the Syrian government and its allies. But the forces which were trained by the United States were, in fact, proved to be ineffective. When they lost, they either abandoned their weapons, sometimes they decided to join the group or the forces that were fighting against them. Once you send weapons to a country that is facing civil war, you can no longer control those weapons, and that's a problem.